I'm Stephen Monteith, and I'm here to rewrite Overdrawn at the Memory Bank. This is a TV movie that will mostly be familiar to fans of Mystery Science Theater 3000 and public television from the 1980s. It's an adaptation of a short story by multiple award-winning sci-fi author John Varley. He wrote it back in 1976 as part of his 8 Worlds series of stories, and it was adapted into a TV movie by American Playhouse in 1983. It starred the late Raul Julia, a wonderful dramatic actor who is perhaps best known for his hammy and cheesy roles like Gomez in the Addams Family movies or M. Bison in Street Fighter. He took the starring role in Overdrawn at the Memory Bank because of his support of public television, all the work he did for it, and his performance just barely makes this sophomore movie watchable. That and the performance of Donald Moore as the chairman, aka the Fat Man. But the movie was ultimately immortalized by Mystery Science Theater 3000 in 1997. MST3K has that effect. It, despite making fun of the movies that they feature, they have brought a substantial number of movies out of almost certain obscurity, and they continue to do so under the Cinematic Titanic and Riff Trax labels. Movies like Manos, The Hands of Fate, Space Mutiny, Birdemic, and Overdrawn at the Memory Bank would certainly be lost to oblivion without Joel and Mike and the rest turning them into fodder for jokes and for lampooning. Overdrawn at the Memory Bank is actually a pretty fair movie for one that was produced for public television in the early 80s. Having one of John Varley's stories as its foundation certainly helps, but there are plenty of original elements that were added for the adaptation. The basic story is about a man named Fingal, who, played by Raul Julia, who lives in a future where medical technology is so advanced and so simplified that only dummies would become medicos. It's so advanced that you can take a person's consciousness, their mind, their personality, whatever, out of their brain and put it into the brain and the body of an animal and let them sort of ride around inside the animal's brain for a few days. This is what counts as a vacation in the future, apparently. And it's called doppling. In the short story, Fingal is doppling voluntarily, but in the TV movie, he's forced to as punishment for watching movies on company time, something that would have seemed impossible back in the 70s and the 80s, but is probably pretty common today. Anyway, it's not really clear in the TV movie whether his job is forcing him to take a vacation like this because they think he's just restless and that taking time off will make him focus more while he's on the job, or if doppling is also a form of brainwashing. So there's a lot of subtle 1984 elements to the TV movie that they don't really explore all that much. They're just a few lines of dialogue here and there. But either way, he has to pay for the doppling himself, and the Doppling Center is owned by the same megacorp that he works for. So they're basically benefiting from it, whether it works on him or not. Once Fingal is doppled, His dormant body is sent to storage, but it gets lost due to a prank by a young boy who's visiting the Doppling Center with his class. So when Fingal needs to get his consciousness reinserted into his body, they can't find it. And his consciousness is put in the main computer, the main Megacorp computer, to keep it from degrading while they search for his body. A tech named Apollonia is Fingal's connection with the outside world. She tries to explain to him what happened and why he needs to try to live a normal life inside the computer while they look for it. It probably would have been easier for him to do if time didn't move so much slower for Fingal. You see, it's like in the movie Inception. 1 hour in the real world equals 1 month inside the computer for Fingal. So while it basically takes just the length of a work shift to finally find his body, for Fingal it seems like it takes half a year. And his impatience causes a lot of trouble in both worlds, because being hooked up to the main computer of a megacorporation means he has access to a lot of different types of files and programs. In the short story, he mostly just uses it to educate himself, basically like somebody taking college classes for a semester. In the movie, though, in the TV movie, he interferes with weather control programs, financial programs, etc. And the chairman of the corporation is not happy about that, obviously. Keeps threatening to give up the search for his body, effectively killing him. And it creates a lot of angst for Apollonia. But for some reason, it just doesn't stop Fingal from screwing around. Anyway, there are a couple of options for remaking, for rewriting Overdrawn at the Memory Bank. Like I said, it's a good story, and it has a lot of elements that are shared by movies like Inception, The Matrix, Ready Player One, anything with virtual reality in it. And like I said, the TV movie adds in some 1984 elements with various rival megacorporations pretty much ruling the world, it's implied. And like I said at the beginning, John Varley wrote it as part of a series of short stories and novels that are all set in basically the same setting, almost 24 of them, in fact. A couple of other stories in the series, called Blue Champagne and Options, were later adapted into episodes of an anthology TV series in 1998 called Welcome to Paradox. A streaming service like Netflix or Amazon, or even the Sci-Fi Channel, could create an anthology series based solely around Varley's 8 worlds, with each story becoming at least one episode of its own. And Overdrawn at the Memory Bank could be a much more faithful adaptation to the original short story in that case, even if it ends up just being the length of 1 or 2 TV episodes. That's option 1. Option 2 is to adapt the TV movie with all its additions and unique elements. Those unique elements, like I said, include the Megacorp rivalry, the corporation that Fingal works for and that controls weather services and other things in the Doppling and whatnot. That's called NovaCorp, and they seem to be the big one, but their rival is called LexaCorp. No, not LexCorp. That would make this a Superman movie. We'll call that option 3. Anyway, there's a character in the movie who works at the Doppling Center. She's named Jamila, and she works for NovaCorp, but we see her at various points feeding information to LexaCorp. And it's not really clear what her status is, if she's some kind of industrial spy, or if she's just screwing around. But her status is never really fully explored in the movie. But it could provide some interesting possibilities for a reboot. I'll get more into that in a little bit. Another thing that's added for the TV movie is Fingal's love of cinemas. Now, in this future, nobody watches cinemas anymore. Nobody's really even heard of them. They're all on some big database somewhere. They still exist, but only the NovaCorp chairman is allowed to watch them for some reason. Like I said, it gives the future an undercurrent of dystopia, but it just doesn't make any sense. Anyway, but Fingal, like I said, was caught scrolling up movies at his job, and that's why he was sent to go doppel. And when he's stuck in the NovaCorp central computer, his love of cinemas give the virtual reality that he creates in there a bit more form. He imagines himself as Rick from Casablanca, and there are some minor elements from other classic films that are sprinkled around the edges of it. And that, while it just seemed cheesy in the TV movie, it could make for an interesting virtual world if a little more effort is put into it. Ready Player One, which I mentioned before, was built around 80s nostalgia. But if somebody really wanted to write a love letter to the black and white era of film, this would be their chance. Another element of the TV movie that is different is that Fingal's tampering with the computer programs and files is much more deliberate. In the short story, it's practically accidental. I mean, it pretty much comes out of nowhere for the reader and for Fingal himself. But in the TV movie, even after he promises to stop, he keeps doing it. He gives some vague explanation that he doesn't believe NovaCorp is doing enough to help him, which he could conceivably believe, considering that every hour in the real world is a month for him. But even with that time distortion effect, he says that he's looking for his own way out of the computer, which frankly doesn't make any sense. I mean, how is he supposed to go looking for his body when he's stuck inside the computer? And how's he supposed to get back into his body without NovaCorp's help? I mean, none of this is explained in the movie at all. And even when he does break into these restricted files, he doesn't go on some virtual search for his body. He just starts changing weather patterns and giving NovaCorp workers extra money in their accounts. I suppose that last part is supposed to make him look like some kind of Robin Hood, but all the weather patterns that he changes, I mean, he literally creates blizzards in the summer, and he creates tornadoes and floodings. And that's not exactly helping the little guy. Also, whether or not NovaCorp is actually the government in the future, which, like I said, is not exactly clear, but it's definitely implied. You don't just collapse a government in one afternoon, not unless you have a plan to replace that government, or unless you're a complete and total anarchist. This is where we get back to LexaCorp. The tech I mentioned earlier, Jamila, who's been feeding them information, if she is a mole for NovaCorp's main rival, then she could be trying to take them down directly so that LexaCorp can take control, can take over, can do a hostile takeover or whatever. It would explain Fingal's actions once his consciousness is hooked up to the main NovaCorp computer. If he and Jamila were working together, it could also explain how his body got lost in the first place. It would make a lot more sense than a prank by a schoolboy. You see, what would happen is Fingal would get doppled, his body gets quote-unquote lost, and NovaCorp is forced to hook Fingal's mind up to their computer while they search for him, which effectively gives his mind months inside their computer to do whatever he needs to do. It's the perfect plan for a saboteur. And there's actually some evidence for this this kind of connection between Fingal and Jamila in the TV movie. But it's not really, but it could be interpreted as evidence. You see, when Apollonia originally calls up Fingal's file to doppel him into an animal, Jamila walks into the room and says it's her shift, and she wants to take over. But Apollonia says that she's going to do just one more case, Fingal's case. And when things start to go wrong later, Apollonia feels responsible for Fingal because she was the one who doppeled him, and she volunteers to keep an eye on him throughout his time hooked up to the computer. But if she had ended her shift on time, and Jamila had taken over as she was trying to, then Jamila would have been the one monitoring Fingal and interacting with him throughout the whole movie, which would have been ideal if they were a team who was trying to take down NovaCorp from the inside. She sticks around by Apollonia's side through much of the movie, which could either be friendship, or it could be in furtherance of her status as a LexaCorp mole. And even though Fingal's body is lost, Jamila's the one who rolls it in at the last minute so that he can be rejoined with his mind, almost as if she knew where the body was the whole time. Now, if Jamila and Fingal are both moles trying to take down NovaCorp, that's not going to be much of a twist ending if we're seeing all of this from Fingal's perspective. But maybe it doesn't need to be a twist. Like I said, I did a podcast about twists, and I said that they're my least favorite part of any story. Now, when I write my stories, I usually try to write them without adding twists to them. But if we do want to make Fingal's mole status a twist, then we could always just do the whole movie from Apollonia's perspective. She's the fly in the ointment, the wrench in the works, the unforeseen variable in Jamila and Fingal's plan. Apollonia stayed on shift longer than she was supposed to, which kept Jamila from being Fingal's contact, and which made it likely that she could discover their plan and expose them to the NovaCorp chairman. That adds a certain level of tension one way or another. Either the audience knows the twist the whole time and is waiting to see how long it will take Apollonia to figure it out, and what she'll do once she learns of it, or the audience learns about Finkel being a mole at the same time that Apollonia does. Either way, this movie should definitely be her story. And she's a much more interesting character than Finkel is, in my personal opinion. And she has more room to grow as the plot progresses. Plus, I really think it's time for us to have more of these high concept sci-fi shows, and even just plain old action sci-fi shows where the women are the main characters. You know, Finkel would sort of take on the femme fatale role, and Jamila and Apollonia would be the main characters in this movie. Speaking about what Finkel's role in the movie is, another option occurred to me when I was considering whether or not Finkel was sabotaging the NovaCorp computer on purpose. I mean, after all, trading one megacorp for another isn't exactly revolutionary. It doesn't exactly make them Robin Hoods. Jamila and Finkel would most likely be doing it for the money, which, but what if they had different motivations? What is Finkel really doing? Is he a corporate spy? Is he a thief? Is he in it for revenge against NovaCorp or something? Is he an anarchist? The more I thought about it, the more I realized his role in the sabotage of the NovaCorp computer is essentially that of a computer virus. Now, I don't know much about computer viruses or artificial intelligence, but it occurred to me that a society that can implant a human mind into a computer should be able to write a program that acts enough like a human to fool whichever tech is assigned to watch it. This is where I started to get clever, if I do say so myself. What if that's really all that Finkel is? An artificial intelligence program designed to be inserted into a doppled animal as if it were just any ordinary human mind, and then plugged into the main computer for safekeeping when they can't find his body, which never existed in the first place. They could look for Finkel's non-existent body for as long as they want, or they could give up the search and write him off. But once he's been implanted into the NovaCorp computer, his program will be able to do whatever it needs to do. And now, the question isn't just what will Apollonia do once she finds out that Finkel and Jamila are moles, but what will she do when she finds out that Finkel is nothing more than a byte in a giant computer? It would certainly add more meaning to the awful line that she says in the movie, electrons don't dance. And it would give the movie another theme to explore regarding Finkel's identity and personality and his budding relationship with Apollonia. It'd be like the movie Her, only with their roles reversed and with a corporate espionage backdrop. There can also be elements from Inception, where Apollonia experiences the drawn-out time periods inside the computer while keeping contact with Finkel, and then returning to the real world where only a few seconds or minutes have passed. And of course, there are all the elements from 1984 and other dystopian futures that could be added in there. The various the various ethical and moral implications of trying to take down a world government that's run by a corporation, trying to decide what the right thing to do is for all the people who work for this corporation and will suddenly be out of a job, if it fails. It's a lot to explore, and with the right director and actors, it could seriously have a lot of relevance to what we're going through today in a lot of different ways. And needless to say, it would have much better special effects than they had in 1983. So those are my ideas for rewriting Overdrawn at the Memory Bank. Either adapt the original short story faithfully as part of an anthology TV series for the whole 8 Worlds universe, or take the public television TV movie and turn it into the best blend of Inception, Her, 1984, The Matrix, and of course Casablanca that we can get. Or maybe a Superman story. So, thank you for listening. This has been my second Stephen Rewrites. Be sure to check out my rewrite of the Star Wars saga, episodes 1 through 9. And be sure to check out my podcast and my original fiction. Links to both will be in the description. Be sure to leave a rating and review, whatever you read or watch or listen to.